Welcome back to Marriage 501, and you'll each get an honorary PhD when the conference is over, because I am pushing you. I want to own that, and I apologize. Y'all remember the story I told before? It's worth telling again, about the old man at my church. He had this long beard. We called him Moses. And one day at a men's prayer breakfast at our church, we had this marital therapy professor come speak at the prayer breakfast, and he went on for an hour about the dynamics and subdynamics of the meta interactions of the marital dyad, you know. And finally, when he was done and he closed in prayer, and that little silence after you say amen before the chairs push back, you know, Mr. Lemon, Moses, says loud enough for everybody to hear. He says, "I'm just glad I got married before it got so complicated." So, I apologize. Here's another Mr. Lemon story, since people are still straggling in. I've got a million Mr. Lemon stories. He was a good friend of mine. So when I was a teenager, he was already old. Oh, actually, here's two Mr. Lemon stories. I saw him, he was kind of walking down the hall like this with his cane, and as I passed him, I started kind of like jiving. I going, "Mr. Lemon, looking good." Like this, and he doesn't stop, he doesn't turn around, he just goes, "Look again." All right, but when we were younger, when he was younger and I was younger, he crosses me in the halls of the church. He goes, "John?" I say, "Hey, Mr. Lemon." He goes, "You been reading your Bible?" I'm like, oh yeah, Mr. Lemon, been reading it." He goes, "You been reading it every day?" Well, "Oh, yes, sir, I've been reading." He goes, "Well, we've had it over at the Lost and Found at the church for about 6 months, so I was wondering if you..." That was Mr. Lemon. All right, so I alluded to this talk last night, and I'm excited about this talk. I rarely get to do this talk publicly, and it's one of my favorites, and it's one of the things I deal with constantly in my office, and I've never heard anybody speak about it before or talk about it before. And I told you that this conference is the #1 downloaded conference on my podcast. My podcast, I keep referring to it. It's not like I have a podcast, like today's guest is, Barack Obama. No, it's just a platform for all my conferences. Anyway, this is the #1 by twofold of any talk on my podcast. Like, people love this talk. I don't know. I'm astonished at how sometimes it's the only hope in so many situations. I'm astonished at how well it works. It's hard to master it. It takes some practice and a different way of thinking. But I find sometimes it's the only solution. And my clients say, "I could never learn this," but then they do, and I really see their lives change so much. So last time we talked about conflict in the Finders Keepers Conference. But as I mentioned last night, that talk was predicated on the assumption that both of you were both of you were, biblically speaking, repentant. That both of you were, in essence, saying, "Hey, yeah, this is not good. Let's work on it together. I'm willing to look, whatever." In fact, everything you've ever heard me talk about has been predicated on the assumption that you were repentant. At least a repentance of intention, that your heart said, "Yeah, I'm at least interested in giving up my Saturday morning, for crying out loud, where I want to be home making like pancakes and my jammies, and you're here to learn about your marriage, so, yay you." But anyway, that's repentant enough for me. So that openness, that humility has been kind of an assumption I've made always. But here's the interesting question, and what I see constantly in the office. What about people who are jerky and they like it? What about people whose sort of go-to tone is hurtful and unkind? And when you try to push back on it, or you go, "That feels kind of yucky," they just go tough. A guy I worked with a while back, his wife was this real bully in essence, and everybody in the family was terrified of her. And when she'd come home from work, his wife, their mother, everybody would just kind of scatter, including him. And she'd walk in the house and hear the racket, and the first thing out of her mouth was, "This is why I'm always in a bad mood." And everybody's cowering from this bully. And she doesn't care. And of course she's not going to come to therapy. What do we do about those kind of people? Because I encounter them, and I would say 50% of the situations that I work with that involve a marriage involve situations like this. So I'm seeing the dude, I'm seeing his wife, and I'm thinking, we need to give you some power because A, we need to kind of dethrone her as an alpha who's spreading such chaos and fear, and B, what are you teaching your children by the fact that you're scattering too? Y'all are all under the bed, you know? I want you to give your kids more of a sense of that it's legit to push back on somebody who's hurtful. So, what about those people who you come to with a problem, this doesn't feel good, and they're like, oh my gosh, why do you have to make such a big deal out of it? You're so sensitive. Or their go-to tone of voice is sort of like, you spent what? This one guy tells me, you're not going to believe my wife. I'm watching the game, and I look up and she's just screaming at me. She's saying, you haven't heard a word I've said. And I'm thinking, that's a really weird way to start a conversation. Anyway, or that person who's kind of a repeat offender, you know, they're hurtful, they undermine you in front of other people at a party, and then they apologize, but then they do it again and again and again. In other words, how do we respond to out of control or habitual or hurtful aspects of a spouse or anybody, and ultimately they really don't care? Or maybe they're good people, you know, regular old people, and they're just having an off day and kind of, you know, edging at you, all right? So how do we deal with difficult people, and how do we deal with regular people when they're being difficult? And this is key. And do so in a way that's going to do two things. It's going to protect you from their hurtfulness, because, as we'll say later, you, with these kind of people, you will be treated as poorly as you permit. How do we, A, help protect you from their hurtfulness, like this guy and running from, you know, walking on eggshells? But number two, as I alluded last night, this is the only way that unrepentant people grow. In other words, the question I've had for a long time is, what does it look like to respond in a godly, Christ-like, powerful, loving, strong way to a difficult person? That's what we're shooting for here. I can't tell you how much I deal with this in my office, all right? And I'm not talking like domestic violence or something, though that would be applicable. We can talk about that. This can just be a nitpicker or a pouter. Every family has got somebody who basically is kind of running the family with their mood, all right? Some sort of hostage taking. So what do you do with these kind of people? I'm going to tell you. So let's begin. Let's begin at the beginning. It's a very nice place to start. All right? As I alluded last night, when God meets somebody, the first question that he has is, are they repentant or are they unrepentant? This is a distinction that I don't see made enough in Christian community, okay? We don't think about the fact that these are two very different animals. In other words, his question is, are you someone who is open to changing and humble and willing to look at the fact that there's stuff about you that can be hurtful, or are you kind of comfortable being jerks? Okay? And his next step is going to be predicated on the answer to that question. God always starts there, and we often don't. One of the things that I've seen in Christian culture throughout my life and practice that I think is kind of kooky is that we as Christians, and certainly we as married Christians, are kind of taught that our primary tool for dealing with difficult people should always be gentleness and kindness and love, and, you know, don't keep a record of wrongs. And yeah, this person's really kind of cruel and cutting, but are you turning the other cheek? Are you living out Christ for them? You know, are you winning them over without a word? Are you submitting humbly? As if, you know, that's what Christ-likeness means. Like Jesus is this kind of milquetoast who just wants to be friends, you know, because all he is gentle and lowly, right? So I'm constantly dealing with these nice people who are living with a jerk who's doing jerky stuff to them, and they feel victimized, and it's like, no, what I'm supposed to do is to always take this Christian high road and be this nice person, and they end up living in this kind of a victim position. And they end up actually saying things about these people like, well, that's just the way they are, you know. And they live helpless to this perp, okay? And the perp's having a great time. I mean, it's candy land for them. They got this humble Christian living with them, letting them get away with all this, you know, stagecoach robbery. So actually this nice thing is not what I hear the Bible saying. What I hear the Bible talking about a lot is kind of talking about different categories of people, okay, and different ways that we should respond to them therein. Think about 1 Thessalonians 5:14. Help the weak, rebuke the unruly, be patient with all men. And you have these categories. I love Psalm 18. The writer says, it's as if God is saying, he says, to the pure I am pure, and to the blameless I am blameless, and to the wicked I am shrewd. That's what we're going to be doing this morning. Is what does it sound like and look like to be shrewd? Some categories to think about how we can pick our response to people. And that might be love if they're repentant. It might be tenderness and openness and patience. It might be limits, though. I think the first question God asks is, are they repentant or unrepentant? And how can we do the same thing? Let's start with repentant. What does a repentant person need? A repentant person basically needs patience, love, restoration, forgiveness, redemption, goodies. I've fallen, I've failed, I'm hurtful, I want to stop. That person needs to be wrapped in the arms and given some of those ingredients we talked about last night that make our hearts grow. What does an unrepentant person need? Well, basically, to become a repentant person, all right? And in God's universe, that usually has some direct engagement with truth and limits. Go read the Bible. If you do not work, you do not eat. Have nothing to do with such people, 2 Timothy 5. If a brother sins, go tell him his fault, Matthew 18. As for a person who stirs up division, after warning them once, and after warning them twice, have nothing more to do with them, Titus 3. And he's talking about Christians. And he's talking about a real heads-up, conscious, deliberate, not reactive intervention with hurtful people, and we don't talk about that. But apparently God sees this kind of limit setting as fundamental to redeeming people who are hurtful and protective of you, okay? And I see this work when we do it, what I'm going to teach you, 90% of the time. Not 100%, but not 50%. 90%, all right? I actually made a bet with a woman once. She had this jerky husband, and I said, he doesn't need to come to therapy. You need to go to therapy. If you change the system, he will change. She's like, nuh-uh. I'm like, bet me. Bet me. And she goes, what? I said, he doesn't change. It's a 90-10. It's good odds for me. He doesn't change. I give you a free session. He does change. I get a gift certificate to Nick's, which was my favorite restaurant at the time. So about 6 months later, she just walks in the office and she goes, all right, so the question I've had a long time in my practice and kind of a pet project of mine is, what does it look like to respond in a powerful, loving, Christ-like way to hurtful people, all right? Or good people who are just being unpleasant today and taking it out on you. Because if you respond to a hurtful, jerky person with just love and compassion, they will take that as license and they will grind you into powder. Let me explain where we're going with an example. I'm going to try to give you a lot of examples for this because I want you to get kind of the feel of it, the flavor of it. I had this couple once, and she complains a lot. She has a job, and she would complain about her job all the time, and she would come home and she would talk to her husband and complain about her job. And her husband would respond with a recommendation for how to solve her problem. Big surprise there, right, ladies? Yeah, you didn't see that one coming, huh? So obviously not the best response, but what happened then was she would then unload on him. It's like she would go from complaining to like, see, this is why I never talk to you. I'm never going to talk to you again. You never support me. You never have. You always find everything is my fault. And she basically goes postal on him for his mistake. Now think, what are our typical responses when somebody acts that way to us? Usually if somebody attacks us with that kind of a criticism, one of the things we can do is defend. It's like, no, baby, that's not what I was meaning. I was just trying to, all right, you go there. Or we can attack back. Okay, fine, then just don't ever talk to me again. Or we cower, which kind of he did, and that is sort of like, I'm just going to try to appease, and it's like, he gets mad if his clothes aren't folded just right, so I'm just going to make sure and fold them, I'll never make this mistake again. I have a client who husband goes ragey, and she feels very helpless and feels like she can't do anything about it. And she says it's just like a ride at the fair. Once it starts, there's nothing you can do. You just sort of close your eyes until it's over. I don't want y'all there, right? Or they use he language, she language. That's what I call it in my office. You don't believe what he did next. You can't believe what she did. Okay, and you kind of come tattle your therapist. That's what we usually do when people does stuff like this. Okay, so kind of pick a card, any card. In my example, his style was typically to cower and kind of to defend himself because he's kind of a compliant sort of guy who doesn't want her unhappy with him. So he would go, that's not what I'm saying, baby. And they live this lifestyle, this dance, in which she's constantly going off on him and he's constantly trying to appease her and convince her that he's not the bad guy. Okay? You get it? But what he started doing since joining my dojo is when she starts going off on him for not dance monkey dancing like she wants him to, he starts to set a limit on her. And he says, whoa, look, I care that I missed you. And I care that I responded again in a way that really kind of felt bad to you. And I'm really willing to talk about that. But I'm not willing to continue standing here and interacting with you if what you need to do is just go off on me. And he leaves the room. In other words, he sets a limit on what she is doing by making a choice for himself. He's not appeasing, he's not defending, he's not cowering, he's not sitting there accepting it. I mean, how many times my clients go, you're not going to believe this. She just yelled at me for like 3 hours. And when they do that, I always look at their feet. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm making sure you had feet. Like, why you sat there for 3 hours? I'm confused, In other words, so many people who have this predatory person in their life will just sort of sit and endure it like that. So even in this example, we're beginning with a category that's going to be a fundamental one throughout our talk this morning, and that is that you have power here. Right off the bat, you don't have to actually sit and listen to that, okay? One of the most powerful interventions with somebody who's acting inappropriately is to say, I love you, I want to resolve this, we can talk about it, but whoa, man, you're leading with sort of some fists and fury. Can we do a do-over? And they're like, no. And I go, well, I need to step out of the room. Now, some of you are thinking, what if they follow you to the other room? Well, you'll leave the house. Well, what if they follow you out of the house? Well, you get in the car. Well, what if they stand at the car and bang on the door? See, this happens, okay? And we'll back out and leave. What if they're standing behind the car and won't let you leave? We call the police. I mean, we can take this as far as you need. All right, I can tell you it usually stops with the room most of the time, okay? Actually, in one of these situations with him, I love this. She started railing on him in the car, and he pulled into a parking lot, and he cut the engine off, and he got out of the car with the keys on his finger. And he said, I am not going to try to control you. You can yell at me all you want. This is not about me telling you what to do. I need to set a limit for me. I'm not willing to sit and be yelled at. So you can yell as long as you want. I'm just not going to be in the car to hear it. And it helped that it was Mississippi in the summer. Yes! Okay. So do you hear this? It's not control. I'm setting a limit for me in response to what they're doing. That's the mentality we're going to be building today, okay? What most people do is that person acts jerky, and I'm going to defend, attack back, cower, try to appease, whine about what a mean spouse I have. I want you to begin thinking about, the next person who acts, the next person who speaks, you, has all the power in the relationship. The only issue, it's kind of like parenting, is getting creative about what those interventions are. And so I'm going to give you a ton of examples, okay? So when we do that, we're setting limits on the aggressor, which is fantastic. It protects me, but it also is the only way that people grow who are jerky, okay? So let's look at some levels of intervention here with jerky people. And this is going to be a hierarchy. We're going to start out real bush league, and we're going to intervene higher and higher and higher as we need to as we go. All right? So what are our options with an unrepentant or just one of regular people who are having an off day? Number one, our principle begins with this. Everything I'm going to tell you, you can't control anybody, right? Don't even try. But you can't control, but we can certainly intervene, and we can certainly influence. In other words, you can't control anyone, but you can relate to them in such a way that they have to learn to control themselves. You can't control anybody. You can't change a jerk, but you can certainly intervene with them to create enough frustration and unhappiness in their lives to where they might change themselves. That's where we're going, all right? First level, lightweight. You have somebody, they're being jerky and critical, they're being slobs and love leaving their stuff lying all around, they're testy and irritable when things aren't going their way. The first thing I want you to do to intervene with that difficult person is really complicated and really sophisticated and radical. I want you to ask them, would you be willing? Those of you who've followed John Cott's conferences know this phrase. I have marriage people all the time go, oh my gosh, all we do is say, would you be willing? You know, okay, I love this phrase, would you be willing? Because it's got a lot of levels to it, all right? You know, you could get real intense on Sunday mornings when we're trying to get ready for church. Would you be willing to look at that? Because it kind of it sucks all the air out of the house. Would you be willing just to kind of get curious about that? Hey, you know, at that party, you kept interrupting my stories when I was trying to talk. Would you be willing to not jump in and sort of, you know, hijack the conversation? Now you're thinking, well, that's dumb and easy. That's not going to work. They're going to go, no. All right. And perhaps they will, but think about it. When was the last time in a conflict you actually felt asked? I mean, what do we do in a conflict? We complain, we demand, we withdraw, we defend, we blah, blah, blah. I want you to begin by asking. And this kind of asking isn't just nice. Trust me, it's also powerful. There's a hook in it. Asking is powerful, and here's why. Because asking, would you be willing, with that tone, forces people to actually have to come up in engagement with. They might not be willing to look at it. They'll have to engage with what they really value, what they are willing to do, which is usually a bit of a wake-up call to most of us, okay? So if I say, would you be willing, what I'm saying is I'm not going to disappear. I'm not going to comply. I'm also not going to be a jerk or control or nag. I'm just asking you. And the willingness to do what your spouse is asking will be yours. And the unwillingness will be yours. In other words, this is no longer about me annoying you and nagging you and begging you and being a pest. This is about you being completely free to do whatever you please. And you are just going to say, I am not willing. Care to look at what that might say about you? It kind of puts them in that position. It's like that old story about the guy who was talking to Martin Luther, and he says, wait, if this whole justification by faith alone thing is real, then I could be saved and then just live as I please. And Martin Luther said, yeah, I guess. Now, what pleases you? That's a bit of a wake-up call for me, and it will be for them, okay? Now notice how kind I'm being. One of the things you'll hear throughout these interventions is they will be kind. They're not angry, okay? They're not angry sounding. It's secret of the universe. Anger is how we act when we don't feel powerful, okay? In fact, there's an inverse relationship between how angry I am and how powerful I am. That's how I came up with my model for discipline in the parenting book, because I realized if I was feeling this angry and yelling at my kids, I was feeling really not powerful. And to the degree that we become powerful, we actually become less angry. So I want you here today to become powerful, and you better do this without being angry, okay? By the way, this is also one of the reasons that jerks are mean. Jerks are mean because they feel so weak. Strong people don't have to pitch a hissy fit. So, to the degree that you're becoming more powerful, you won't need to be angry, all right? Like Patrick Swayze says in the classic art film Roadhouse, be nice. Be nice until it's time to not be nice. And I actually don't think we're going to need to not be nice today. I think nice is going to work if we're clever, okay? Now let's keep going. Some people are going to take that kind of nice asking as license, and they're going to blow you off, thumb their nose. Am I willing? No. So, like God, and in Matthew 18, we're going to take it up another notch. If asking doesn't get their attention, the second thing we're going to do is start telling them the truth about reality. In other words, we're going to start speaking to them about what they are creating, what is happening. We're going to be going bird's eye on them. We're going to show them the truth. And here we really get rolling, gang, okay? Step 2 is I'm basically going to be telling them the truth about what they are creating. Just the truth, okay? No condemnation. I'm not even asking them to change. I'm just speaking the truth. We're going to spend some time on this one because this is so powerful and important and key with people who are reactive and critical and pouty and nitpicky and rageful and all of the difficult, yucky things, okay? Learning what it looks like and how important it is to speak truth and speak reality to them, because here's the key. Destructive people love to live and hide behind an illusion. And the illusion is, how dare you act this way? The illusion is you actually cannot have any voice and any power here. The illusion is what you did deserves this sort of yelling and screaming. And I have families all the time going, oh, I could never say that to him. And they've kind of fallen under the spell. We're going to break that illusion, okay? One of the ways I do this, I call a psychological mirror. But a psychological mirror is basically me mirroring back and just basically telling them, showing them the truth of who they are, okay? And a mirror doesn't nag. A mirror doesn't threaten. A mirror just tells the truth. It doesn't say you ought to change. It doesn't say you're so bad. It just gives you information. The truth is so and so. A mirror's like, you got a piece of spinach on your tooth, okay? And you can leave it there if you want. Now, James would say you'd be a fool if you looked in the mirror and turned away. If you're not interested in seeing the truth of reality and letting that impact you, woe to you. But here's what the truth sounds like. An old client of mine came up with this one. Her husband was chronically hurtful and critical of her. And she would just get grounded in herself, strong, and say things like this. She said, every time that you treat me this way, and when you talk to me in this tone, I can feel something in me kind of just pull further and further away from you. Like I can feel our relationship becoming more and more distant. You hear it? There's no therefore here. She's not even telling him to stop. She's just holding up the mirror. This is what is happening. Jerks do not like to see the truth of what is happening, and it's vital that we begin telling them, okay? And again, do you hear her tone? She's not angry. She's powerful. She's telling the facts. It's like, if you spend $1, you got $1 less, Sherlock. That's a psychological mirror, okay? Your mom is critical for how you parent. Well, I just don't see why you're feeding them all that junk food, because I just, I mean, she's constantly on your case about how you parent. Everything's wrong. I'm not comfortable with that school y'all are talking, blah, 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 blah. Now, don't defend. Mom, we've really looked into it. Don't explain. Well, I'll tell you what. Don't jab back. Mom. If you do that, you're getting in the dance. Go psychological mirror on her. Wow, Mom, you've been thinking a whole lot about us and our choices and our parenting. They don't know what to do with that. Because what they're expecting is for you to play. I'm going to be critical and you defend. I'm going to be critical and you comply. I'm going to be critical and you start to squirm. I'm just going to mirror. You've been thinking a lot about it. And she's going, well, I've had years of experience being a parent, okay? And you go, you really have. And I can tell that you really care about the choices we're making, and I thank you. In other words, you're going Gandhi on them, in a sense. I'm not going to play with a jerky person. They can play with themselves, okay? I just want to show them themselves, okay? I had a relative once who, I guess I was in my 30s still, and she said, John Cox, I cannot believe that you just did so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And I looked at her, and I said, Aunt Sally, you're scolding me. She didn't know what to say. Silence. I mean, I broke every rule. You're supposed to defend. I'm supposed to feel ashamed. Okay, you get it? I'm just simply being the mirror. Great second intervention. I'm telling them the truth about what is happening. God does this all the time. Think about him in the prophets. What does he say? I found you and I made you my bride and you turned from me. He's telling them the truth. Now later on he's going to be saying, I hope you like the weather in Babylon, okay? But he's not quite there yet. All right, and we're not either. That's later on in the talk, okay? First he's just telling them what reality is, and I do this with difficult people all the time. Another way of saying this is a psychological mirror is sort of like stepping off the tennis court and looking at what they're doing and pointing at it rather than engaging it. We're going bird's eye on them. We're going observational on them. A repentant person can go bird's eye on themselves. But an unrepentant person, you need to speak it, okay? Now, like I say, this applies to all your different relationships. One of my kids, when they're in college, y'all got college kids? Many? Okay. Okay, so she wants to go, there's a storm and the sirens are going off and it's 11:30 and limbs are falling. She's like, I'm going to Kelsey's house. And I'm like, no. It's like, there's like sirens and stuff. And she said, you can't tell me what to do anymore. I'm in college. All right, now what do we usually do? Throw down? Oh, yes, I can. Well, I guess you're right. I used the mirror on her. I said, so what you're saying is that now that you're in college, I can no longer speak into your life? And there was this silence, and she said, okay, I won't go. But what would have happened if I had thrown down? I would have played. She would have won, even if I had won. I was visiting with a family once doing a conference in Houston, and I noticed that the son in this family was a real closed snob, and he was real snob to everybody about everything. And so we were sitting around one afternoon after the conference, and we're just kind of sitting near each other, and he looks at me and he goes, your shoes look dumb. Now, I could have gone compliant. Well, I thought my shoes were cool. I could have gone defensive. Well, yours are dumb too. I pulled out the mirror. I said, and you think a lot about what other people wear. Mischief managed, all right? They don't know what to do with this stuff. Bullies do not like to be shown how crazy they are, but we're going to show them. We're not going to fight them. We're going to show them. This is bully judo. I said something ugly the other day. I'm like saying to Norma, like, oh, you forgot to get apples again? And she says to me, are you meaning that to sound mean? Beautiful. Perfect intervention. I had to look at myself. All right, another kind of intervention of showing them the truth that I like is to ask questions. Like a mirror, questions require people to go objective. And that's what we're doing in this part number 2, is showing them reality. So I worked with this couple and they had a small baby, working with them a while back, and they have a small baby. And she says, here, hold the baby. She's a real kind of like critical type. Here, hold the baby. I'm going to take a shower. So he's like, okay. He's holding the baby. The baby immediately falls to sleep. And so he puts the baby in the swing. Baby's now in the swing. She comes out of the shower and she goes, why aren't you holding the baby? Now let me ask y'all. What he usually does is start babbling excuses. Well, the baby went to sleep, so I thought it'd be funny. And he puts himself one down to her, and they live in this place. But inside he's really angry and kind of, feels controlled by her. I've been teaching him to ask questions. She says, why aren't you holding the baby? I want him to say, I'm not sure if what you're saying is a question or a criticism. Which one do you think it is? In other words, a lot of people get victimized by jerks because they don't stop and think this thing this person is saying is not a question. It's an attack veiled as a question, and I'm about to answer it like it's a question. Shame on me, okay? So I'm calling out the question. A wife I was working with starts using these interventions on her jerky husband. and he's being a real jerk to her. And so she says, I don't really feel like I want to continue to interact with you if you're going to keep talking to me in this tone. And she leaves the room. And he says, well, I don't understand what you think walking out of the room is going to do to help our relationship. Now, let me ask you, is that a question? Or is that a jab veiled as a question? And 99.102% of oppressed spouses are going to go, well, I'm leaving the room because, and they're going to answer it like it's a question. Okay, it's not a question, it's a scolding. I want her to say, whoa, I'm not really sure if you're really asking because you want to know, or if you're just wanting to scold me because I'm leaving the room because you're being hurtful. Which one do you think it is? I'll be glad to answer a question. I'm not going to do the scolding. People say, they always use this one. Oh, is that something your therapist taught you? Now, is that a question? Think like a mirror. Do you see there's a certain elegance to these things? I want you to start getting infused with this different kind of flavor of this. This is poetry, not prose, okay? All right, another limit that I think is really helpful in showing them reality is to make a big distinction between style and content. Nobody does this, and it is super key, especially for your interventions, all right? You got to learn this. In any communication, there's two things going on: the content of the interaction and the style that I'm saying it. So, let's give an example. Would you pass the salt, please? What's the content of that statement? Salt, right? What's the style? Nice. Ugh, pass the dang salt. What's the content of that statement? It's still salt. What's the style? Jerky. 100% of the people who come to see me telling me about what a jerk their spouse is, they're even ugly about the salt. 100% of them will still respond to the content despite the fact that the style is jerky. They'll go, it's right in front of you. They're talking about the content. I want you to talk about the style, okay? I want you to say, woo, something going on with you and the salt? I don't think I want to have a salt conversation if it starts like that. Let's do like a do-over, replay, okay? I'd kind of like to ask if you'd be willing to manage whatever this is, okay? I have a client whose dad's a real blowhard, and then they go home for the holidays, and dad's, dad again, and dad comes blowing in the house going, what are you thinking barking like that? That's Merry Christmas for him, Well, let me ask you this. What is the content of that statement? Parking, right. What is the style? Jerky, right? Okay. Now, my client historically has always responded to this by stammering like a 12-year-old at the content. Well, I thought maybe you wanted to get your car out later on, whatever like that. And then he wonders why he's treated like this. Because he's playing. If you respond to the content of a jerky style, you are giving the perp tacit permission to speak to you like that. If I'm willing to answer your salt question or your parking question when you say it like that, I'm saying I, John Cox, do give you permission to talk to me like this because, see, I will actually respond to it, okay? And then you wonder why you're treated badly. We're easing over here a little bit to where I'm pointing at your responsibility in these situations. Most victim spouses or victim offspring of mean parents or whatever talk about, I can't believe they're so bad. Well, there's a ton of power that you have. So this guy started addressing his dad's style. Dad comes in, what do you think of parking like that? And he's like, Dad, let's don't start the holidays with the whole amped up about parking thing. I don't think I'm wanting to go there yet. Okay? Let's do a do-over. He sets a limit by addressing the style. Hear me, the parking is not the issue, the style is. So, secret of the universe number 632, you will be treated as poorly as you permit by these kind of people. If you are willing to answer a question that is framed like that, they will be glad to keep answering it. I have a wife I was working with a while back, and her husband could be such a jerky, petulant child. He wasn't like a mean man. It was like a mean child. Kind of, I know you are, but what am I? That was kind of his style. Of course, he wouldn't come to therapy, but he would say, I have another example about them later on, but he would say to her, like, why don't you dress all like sexy and stuff instead of like, just like slippers and a bathrobe? And she's a little feisty, and she's like, right, so you want me wearing my Vera Wang while I'm watching Only Murders in the Building? I hate you. Go away. That's kind of what she would do, which is kind of fun. I mean, I like that, but it's not powerful, okay? She addressed the style. She said, I don't really do cruel, judgy, demeaning sort of statements like that. And if you're going to interact with me like that, I don't think, not only you're not going to get sexy, you're not going to get me. I don't want to be close to you when you talk to me like that. Okay? She's setting a limit. By the way, a lot of times, jerky people will use this style versus content thing on you. This is what I hear a lot. You say, hey, that kind of didn't feel good that you undermined me in front of your parents. And their response will be to judge you and your style. They go, oh my gosh, you're so judgmental. I just can't do anything right for you, can I? You're so sensitive. Ever hear that one? In other words, they're using the style card on you. Now what do you do? Well, what I want to say, again, the next person to speak holds all the power. Let's intervene. I want to go, whoa, well, I so don't want to be judgmental. So would you teach me how I can talk to you about the ways in which you're hurtful without it sounding judgmental? Because I really want to learn. In other words, can you teach me how to tell you what a narcissistic maniac you are without it being judgmental? Anyway, I'm sorry. Anyway, now they have some skin in the game that you can't just dismiss it by calling me names and not back it up with teach me how to say it in a different way, okay? Oh, another way to respond to that is, oh my gosh, you're just so sensitive. Go psychological mirror. You seem really certain that that's what's going on here. You seem really certain that what's going on here is that I'm being too sensitive. Would you like to ask me any questions? Would you like to actually explore that? Or do you just want to remain that certain and leave? You can think what you want, okay? But I love to psychological mirror that certainty because a lot of these jerks will do the certain thing. I find this kind of teaching so absent in Christian circles, and we're told kind of go back and win them over without a word and be submissive in that, and that doesn't work. Those relationships get worse. And actually it's difficult also because Christian leaders will try in a responsible way to engage these kind of jerky people, and the jerks you just blow up on them. I actually used to do it. I would see a couple with a jerk in it, and I would start going after the jerk, trying to set some limits on them because passive spouse isn't doing it. And they would always leave therapy. They've seen every therapist in town. They'll see us until we disagree with them or push back on them, and then they will bolt. Here's kind of a real important secret here, especially as it relates to your marriage. The only person who has any power in the life of an oppressive, jerky spouse is their spouse. I'm not sure exactly why. I'll take a shot at it. But for some reason, the only person who has power really to intervene with that person is their spouse. And people will go, oh my gosh, they need to get into therapy. No, they don't. You need to get into therapy and learn the stuff I'm teaching you. Therapy is not something that takes place in a room with a guy and a couch. Therapy is any relationship in which I'm getting what I need to grow. And in the case of an unrepentant person, what do they need? Limits. And the only person who can set those limits is their spouse. The secret reason is because at some level, they need you desperately. I'll talk about that later, okay? So I have so many clients come in, and they're going to have another set of he language. You wouldn't believe what he did today, or you wouldn't believe what she said today. But then one day they come in and they say, here's my question this week. Why is it that I don't know better how to respond to them when they're being jerky? And I want to throw like a little party with a mariachi band and little drinks with umbrellas in them, because now there's a hope for them to change. Basically, the reason you have that power is because bullies are weak. They need you very much. That's why they're so mean. Nobody's mean who's strong, right? Strong people don't have to be mean. If I'm that mean, I'm that fragile. Oh, the petulant 8-year-old husband who I was talking about earlier, the sexy one, he will go so critical on her, and I've taught her to start removing herself from the situation. I'm not going to interact with you if you do that. And so he would verbally abuse her, stuff that she wishes wasn't in her head anymore. And then historically, she would leave the house and he would call her. And she would answer. Okay, that's today's puzzler, today's brain teaser. But people who are oppressed by spouses always do that. It's like I was talking to a woman once whose husband was just such an awful slacker about everything, and we couldn't figure out why, and we couldn't figure out that dynamic. And I said, well, tell me a story. Help me get a picture. And she goes, well, okay, here, one that happened this morning, okay? I'd gotten the kids ready for school, and they were all packed up and ready to go, and he was still in the bed, and I went and I brought him his coffee, and I'm like, whoa! Gotcha. I know what we're talking about here. There's always, something, okay? Anyway, so I told her to stop, I'm like, why are you answering the phone? Why would you want to talk to this person who just abused you? Like verbally let you have it. And she got to the place where she wouldn't. She stopped answering. He went nuts. He panicked. He's like texting her friends. I'm worried about her. Like she's not answering her phone. Could something have happened? He's like calling her mom. And all of a sudden he turns into this little child and we got him. Now at that point, we use our power for good rather than evil. What do we do when they turn? What do we do when they do humble themselves? What do they do when they say, I've been such a jerk to you? We do what God does. We welcome them. We bring them home. Again, the prophets. And when you turn, I'll receive you again. This is not punishment. This is intervention. This is not a way to win. It's a way to help them become repentant and to protect you in the process. So when they do bend the knee, we bring them home, okay? This is therapy for an aggressive person. All right, number 3. Another way we intervene with them is set limits on what we are willing to do in our relationship with them. This has so much power, and it's going to create experiential consequences for them, which is the only way that out-of-control behavior ever changes in any relationship, okay? So I had a couple once, and he has this really critical wife, and what their dance was is that she would ask about what's going on at work, he would tell her, and then she'd criticize him about it on repeat. I've been working with him, and he's realizing this dance and trying to teach him some kung fu. And so he's recently bought like a building. And in talking about this, he told me, I don't want to talk to her about it because if I do, I know what's going to happen. Hashtag not first rodeo, right? She's going to say, what'd you do about the building? And I'm going to tell her, and she's going to go, I can't believe you. So I don't want to tell her, but he knew she would ask. She's going to be saying, what do you do about the building? It's going to be like Charlie Brown and Lucy in the football. He's going to do it again, okay? So I recommended he make a choice for himself, a limit for him. And what he said was this. She said, what'd you do about the building? And he said, I love you, and I love opportunities to talk to you about like my work. But one of the things that tends to happen, hear the bird's eye, hear the mirror, one of the things that tends to happen is I tell you and then you go real critical of my choices, and that feels terrible. So I don't think I really want to talk to you very much about things at work anymore. Not for a while. So here he's making a choice about him. Why would he go back and tell her about the building? He knows what she's going to do. So he's changing how to relate to her based on how she treats him. He's Charlie Brown, and he's not kicking the football. So instead of complaining about her, he's actually taking some power. Now, her response at that point is, well, what's that supposed to mean? All right, and we'll talk about what to do with that, all right? But you can't make people change, but the tennis game stops pretty quickly once you stop hitting the ball back, right? Bottom line, limits with a jerk means that how you treat me will affect the way I relate to you. This is not as punishment. It's just responsibility for myself. Which leads to another little principle. Good limits are always a rule about me. Notice I haven't told them to do anything for the last hour. I'm only talking about choices I'm making. A good limit is about me. We don't say to an alcoholic, quit drinking. That's controlling. We say, I don't interact with inebriated people. We don't say, quit yelling at me. We say, I don't think I want to stay in the room if you're going to be yelling. Other examples of ways in which you change your behavior. People have a spouse who's like, well, I'll tell you what the problem in our marriage is. It's because you do this and you do that and you do this and you do that. And they have this list of criticisms of you. Here's a great intervention for that. You know what? I am really so willing to talk about the ways in which we're both at fault in our relationship. But I'm not willing to have the sort of all the ways I'm bad conversation. When you're in a place where you're willing to say, here's the ways I'm really screwing up, and here's the ways you're really screwing up. When you're willing to have kind of a conversation where we're both part of the topic of discussion, let me know. I'll have that discussion, but I'm not willing to have this one. What most oppressed spouses will do is go, no, that's not true. I didn't go into one down defend mode again, okay? I had this guy in my office once. Again, rules for me, all right? He got really ticked at me in my office. He got up off of my couch and came and stood over me in my chair and started lecturing me with his finger in my face like this. You listen to me, Dr. John Cox, like that. And I just looked at his finger. I said, I don't talk to fingers. He goes, I don't know what that means, but I'll tell you this. I said, I don't talk to fingers. Notice I'm not controlling. Get your finger out of my face. I'm not complying. Oh my gosh, I'm not backstroking. Well, I didn't mean it like that. I'm setting a limit on what I am willing to do. There's your power, okay? Now, what if they guilt trip you when you do that? You leave that interaction, you say, I'm not willing to talk about you, and then they go, well, I can tell that you obviously don't really care about our marriage if you're not willing to talk with me screaming at you. Or, oh, so I guess it's all my fault then, huh? A lot of them will try to intervene back at you with the big guilt trip thing, okay? Again, go mirror. Ooh, okay, well, you seem really certain that that's what's going on, that I don't care about our marriage. You seem really certain that I'm saying it's all your fault. You want to ask me some questions? Again, you get out of that dynamic, all right? What about silent treatment? Let's talk about silent treatment just a minute. That's like, since we're talking about shaming, that's a good one. Or any kind of passive aggression, like monosyllables, pouting, kind of like, is anything wrong? No, nothing at all. You know, that kind of thing. How do you deal with that kind of silent treatment thing? By the way, C.S. Lewis said that silent treatment is blackmail. It is a hostage taking. What's the blackmail? Why does silent treatment have any power? Why does it hook us? What's the ransom? Shame. In other words, the message of silent treatment is that you're so bad. You've upset me so much. You're so disgusting that I don't even think I can speak to you. I may even have to be silent, like not even engage you at all, okay? In other words, I'm not willing to take any real responsibility for addressing this problem, but I'm certainly going to create this very loud silence that punishes you, all right? That's the toxin. I want you to get that. Because people are always like, oh, I couldn't say that. She wouldn't speak to me for a week. I'm like, that's a bad thing? No, anything but that. Okay. So what do we do to combat silent treatment? Again, psychological mirror, make the covert overt. With a silent treatment person, I'm going to say, hey, I'm getting a vibe. The room is kind of really filled with this loud silence that you're angry or upset or something. And that's cool. I care, want to understand, and wanted to let you know if you want to process that, if you want to talk about that, I'm open to doing it. But if not, if you need to be silent, that's fine. But you can just let me know, okay? I'm going to go watch Thor Ragnarok again, okay? And what you've done is you've called out the passive-aggressive manipulation by number 2, telling them the truth about reality. So powerful. I'm not trying to change them. I'm just setting a limit on what I'm going to do. All right? I'm going to not going to step towards you, but I'm going to leave the door open for you to pout in an empty room. Okay? All right. Secondly, deal with your own shame. I'm just going to touch this briefly. We can come back to it more if you want. Another secret of the universe. No one else can ever shame you and make you feel bad about yourself, judge you, unless something in you has ears to already hear it. If there isn't something in you already saying, yeah, that's what I've been telling you, all right, then they can come in and go, John, you're a terrible mathematician. And I would go, yeah. I mean, I don't care. It's like I don't have any shame about that. I know I'm bad at math, all right? But if you said, John, you're a terrible speaker, I might go, oh, really? In other words, I already have ears to hear that. Okay, so if you're allowing someone to shame you and judge you and you feel their criticism, one of the things to ask is, wow, what am I doing with my own shame? Okay, that's some of your homework there. Like I said, we can talk about that some other time, okay? And with shame in general, people are like, I can't believe you would do something so stupid. I can't believe that you said that. Did your mama not teach you to clean up? What shamers expect, this is key. Here's the game. And everybody's agreed on the rules of this game, but we don't have to play by them. Shamers and their victims agree to this game. I'm going to shame you, and you are either going to defend and try to prove to me that you're not as bad as I say you are, or you're going to try to shame me back. Those are what we do. No, I didn't do that. I swear. Oh my gosh. No, that's not what I was saying. Or, really? If you weren't such a, okay, that's the game, the rules, all right? We're going to break the rules. We're going to do neither, all right? Go psychological mirror. One I've used on people before is, can I ask you a question? Are you wanting me to feel ashamed right now? Because I'm feeling really stupid. And I'm kind of wondering, is that kind of what you're wanting? One person actually said, to their credit, yeah, I think I really am. I'm like, well, thank you. All right. Go bird's eye on them. They go critical on you. And this is, I love saying this. I think this is the point at which I'm supposed to defend myself and tell you all the ways that what you're saying about me is wrong and it's not true and I really am this good person. But I don't really kind of think I want to do that. So I guess my question is, do you love me even though I'm such a scallywag? Or my third favorite is, I love to call their shame and raise them one. They say, oh gosh, I can't believe you would do that. And I go, yeah. It's like, but that's actually not the half of it. If you really knew me, I'm far worse than you think. I thought I'd put I was a sinner on my resume. I guess that didn't make it on the final draft. In other words, to the degree that I'm not afraid of shame, it takes away all their power. Aggressors hate this stuff. We're not playing their game. We're rebuking the unruly. All right, next level is consequences we create. In other words, we give them a cost. There is a cost to being hurtful in the universe. Here's a great example. I was working with a couple a while back, and he relentlessly flirted with women everywhere, at parties, at work, everywhere. He was always having these kind of sketchy relationships with other women, and it really was humiliating to his wife. It bugged her deeply. It frightened her, and she would beg him to stop and try to push him to take a look at it, and he would just blow her off. But one day his mother gets sick, and he says, my mom is sick, and I want to ask for you to really help me take care of her. Now, she historically has been kind of mousy and done anything anybody wanted, which is why he does this kind of stuff. But after some good therapy work, she's become like Superfly TNT. She's the Guns of Navarone, all right? She's got some power now, and she says to him something like this, I'll be completely glad to help you with your mother, but I have a question for you first. Are you wanting the kind of relationship in which when one of us asks for something from the other person, that the other person actually lets that matter? Because that's not how you've been relating to me. On so many occasions I've asked you to engage differently the way you relate to women, and you just blow me off. And so are you saying you want to change our relationship into one in which when one of us needs something, it actually matters to the other one? If that's so, then yes, absolutely, I'll do anything to help you. But I'm a little confused. Which kind of relationship are you saying that you want? And as soon as you can answer that question for me, I will answer that question about helping you and your mother. Mic drop. And he got into therapy. The goal is to get these people to repent, okay? By the way, this is not retaliation. Retaliation is, oh, now you want something from me, huh, big boy? Switcheroo time. I don't think so. Okay, that's retaliation. This is reality. What we're doing is we're letting their behavior change the way we relate to them and seeing the cost of that. Let me give you an example. This is reality. A lot of people who have oppressive spouses don't live with them according to reality. Think, if you went in a shoe store and they said, we don't sell shoes to stupid-looking, ugly people like you with big feet. Now, let me ask you, are you more or less likely to buy shoes from that shoe store? Okay, and you're going, no way, I'm going there. Why? Are you punishing them? Are you retaliating? Shouldn't you turn the other cheek? No, that's just reality. People don't shop at shoe stores that act like that. But we all have people in our lives who treat us like the shoe store, and we keep going back and going, well, what about you got the lace-ups, And we get abused again. All we're doing is treating them according to reality, all right? Hurtful people will never change until they encounter the cost of the way that they live. Another, by the way, here, a lot of times people hear this and say, well, this is like parenting. I'm like setting limits and discipline on my kids. I don't want to be the mother in this relationship. And I'll remind them, well, actually, no, creating consequences and interventions with irresponsible people is not parenting. It's godliness. Parents often do these things because they're relating to people who are chronically irresponsible and difficult children. Your problem is that you just happen to be married to someone who is chronically irresponsible, and at least on the outside, at least, they're not a child, okay? But we relate to them with similar principles, okay? So it's not parenting. You read the stuff in the New Testament, it's setting limits on hurtful people. Is this vengeance? Only God should be able to bring consequences and limits and retaliation and vengeance on people. Not us. That's not our place. True. Only God can be judge. We're not judging these people. I'm as bad as they are. I'm telling you what to do differently. I'm not saying they should change. I'm telling you, you should change. Our job is not to be judge and vindicator passing down punishment. Our job is to live according to reality, which is godly. So there's a difference between vengeance is only God's. This isn't vengeance. This is limits, consequences, reality, truth-telling, godly. Bottom line here in all of this is this secret of the universe. Yeah, love may keep no records of wrong, but sometimes wisdom must, or you are toast. The next level, we're going to run through these and wrap it up. Sometimes we need third parties. We've asked, we've told the truth, we changed the way we relate, we give them a cost. The third thing is, secret of the galaxy, you have to break the secret. Here's the trick. Bullying only works in secret. I ask people so many times, like, who else knows that your wife treats you like this? And they're like, well, nobody. I'm like, why? It's like, well, I don't want people to know. I'm like, well, does your family know? No, that would make them think bad about her. God says bring in other parties. This is where the authority of the church can be a place, your elders, if some of these people don't honor, the authority of the church. But your big brother, your friends, her parents, okay? We need to create accountability. A lot of ways to do this. I had a couple once, and he would wait till they were in the car to rage at her. And then she couldn't escape. Smart, right? Okay, but we're smart too. What she did was she called one of his friends and said, when he rages at me in the car, can I call you and just hold the phone up? And even if you don't answer, you get a voicemail of him raging. And so he would rage in the car, and she was kind of like that. Well, that shut him down. Bullying only works in secret. You got to get other people involved. They are powerful because their spouse is the only one who knows. All right, you need to get that out there. And lastly, sometimes we need to create some kind of a disciplinary separation. And I make a distinction between that and a formal legal separation, divorcee kind of stuff. Okay, we're not trying to end the relationship here. This is where you open the chest and are squeezing the heart to try to keep the patient alive, all right? A lot of times it's like, I can no longer live with you because of the destructiveness. You see how I told you this would be a hierarchy? I have to get away. I need you to go to the red roof. I'm going to go live with my sister. A couple once, and he was so chronically cruel to her, she actually pushed him to leave, and to his credit, he did. But it broke him. Remember, bullies are weak. He was all alone somewhere, and he got into therapy, and he's doing great. All right, but that wouldn't have happened unless you did the intervention. It's legitimate for us to set limits and separation on people as a consequence for the way they relate. All right? People always tell me when I talk about this or teach them in therapy they could never learn to do it, but they do. And when they do, I see so much change take place. And I just want to give you these categories today to start thinking about and developing. Once we stop pointing the finger at them and what they're doing and instead ask ourselves, how do I become a kung fu master at this whole dynamic of setting limits on a difficult person, we can help them change. This is therapy for unrepentance, all right? Just one last thing. If you are a jerk, I'm actually more the jerk in my marriage. and you want to change, how do you change? Two things. You need insight and understanding. In other words, you need somebody to help you understand why you're acting like such an idiot. What's going on for you? Insecurity, need to control, fear, shame. What's pushing that and motivating that? There's something driving that jerky behavior, okay? Now, if that's all you do, what you get is a very nurtured and insightful rageaholic, okay? So number two, you need actual literal limits set on your behavior, okay? In other words, the child part of us, the part of the 5-year-old that's acting like such a jerk, they think like a child. They need a concrete experience. And telling me, don't act that way because that would hurt your wife, it's like telling an 8-year-old, go do your homework because just think of all the people you'll help one day as a neurosurgeon. He's like, what? You need to take his Xbox away. Did I tell you all about my man cave when I was here last? Okay, so I have a great man cave. All of our girls moved out. The upstairs, I turned the playroom into a man cave. It's like big TV and like an airplane hanging from the ceiling, and it's cool, okay? And so Norma and I got in a tiff. This was several years back. We got in a tiff, and I went up there and I watched the movie, and I came back down to go to bed, and she's like, in her jammies in the covers reading, and I walk in, and it all comes back. I'm like, and another thing, and she's like, ah. So anyway, the next morning she's like, that felt terrible. I'm like, yeah, I know, that was terrible. She says, I had trouble sleeping. You come down screaming at me. I'm like, I know. And a week later, I did it again. But I'm a psychologist, and I know this stuff. And I said, here's the deal. I know I won't stop. I can promise you all day long. If I do that to you again, I lose my man cave for a week. I'm down here with you watching Grey's Anatomy. That'll teach me. A week later, I did it again, and she's like, man cave. But it helped me. I don't know if I've done it since. Okay? Now, a wife might say, oh, so you do it for your man cave but not for your wife? Yeah. Okay, because that part of me is 5 years old. He doesn't care about my wife. He wants to watch, Ragnarok again, okay? Anyway. All right, we have a correct number up here. Let's take a break till 10:30 or so and come back and talk about forgiveness.